So I've been sat here for like a minute or two, and I've just been sort of pondering on what I wanted to make this video about today. And it's really interesting because I know that I wanted to create some content. I knew that I had things I wanted to share. But when it came down to me thinking, oh my goodness, what am I actually going to talk about? I couldn't really comprehend what it was that I wanted to bring to the table. And so I put it out to my guides and I was just like, look, I don't really know what I want to talk about. Can you give me some indication? I've got a few things coming up in my mind, but that was more so coming from a space of, trying to force a desired outcome. And I heard my sort of higher state of being, my higher self, whatever you want to call it, just say to me, well, just press record and see what happens. And so that's what I'm doing. And it's really interesting because in the process of me doing that, they've kind of given me a glimpse, my higher self, my guides, whatever you sort of want to call it in terms of the energies that I connect with when I do things like this. What they've made me realise is there in itself is the answer. What they're showing me is sometimes we don't need to have the answers. We just need to trust the process. We don't need to know how to get from A to B. We just need to have faith that we will. And this is actually something that is coming up not only within sessions with clients at the moment, but also collectively. I feel that we're all kind of going through a bit of that at the moment. And actually I make these sort of videos with the expectation of them being collective messages and equally almost like timeless messages. So they're there for whoever needs to receive them whenever they're meant to receive them. And so, yeah, with where we are at collectively and from a space of humanity at this point in time, none of us really know where we're going. We have an idea, we have glimpses of guidance outside ourselves, but the state of everything that's happening on the planet at this time, so we are December 2025, so to give you an idea based on whenever you may have found this video, that's where we are in terms of the year and the month. But there is a lot going on collectively and a lot of challenges going on collectively. Now, I don't know a lot of what's going on in the world today because, to be quite honest, I don't really pay attention to much of it. And that largely is something that I've done throughout my life. I've never really paid a huge amount of attention to what goes on outside of my bubble. And it's really interesting, because I've had a lot of people over the years chastise me for that, for taking on that sort of stance. For example, I've never voted, ever voted. I've always found it really odd that we would put it in the hands of someone else to control us. And I've said that to quite a few people who've had a reaction to my not voting. And everybody's entitled to their choices in this life. They can do whatever they like and there's no judgment around that. But I certainly have been judged for my choices in terms of not voting and, going down that specific path. But I can never make sense of it, why we would choose someone else to control our life for us. And so I just stuck with my instinct, went with what my heart was guiding me to do around that. And a lot of my life, like I said, I've stayed within my little bubble, never really paid much attention to the news. And if you do, and if you're feeling like you want to sort of turn the noise down in respect of watching the news, I highly recommend it, because a lot of it is just it's causing us to be distracted from what's going on within the inside. There is so much within us that guides us every day, takes us down the paths that we need to sort of be led down, allows us to be more connected to our heart, our inner sense of knowing. Whenever we're watching anything like the news, it can really sort of distract us or, provide a lot of anxiety, fear. The news, to my understanding, is just filled with a lot of stuff that it will create tension in our lives, unnecessary tension. And whilst it's important, I think, to kind of have an awareness of what's happening in the world, it's certainly not beneficial to allow it to completely overtake you. And so what I find is, what my higher self and my guides are sort of teaching me in this moment with this recording is that we're really being called into a space at this time of trust. Really trying to sort of turn down the volume of what is going on outside ourselves and to really tune into what is going on inside ourselves. And I don't mean, what's going on in your digestive system. Do I feel like I'm hungry at the moment and need to go and get some dinner? But, what is our inner guidance telling us? Because we have access to that internal compass, and we have done from day one. And the reason so many of us have that inability to tune into what that sounds like or what that feels like is because for a large part of our lives, especially in the Western world, we have been conditioned to look outside of us. And that can be in so many different levels. So there's so many people that I find that come to me for sessions, whatever sort of form of session that may be, and there's so many people that are kind of giving their power away to others, looking for validation from others, looking for answers from others, and neglecting that that's all within us at any given time. We all have access to that at any given time. But again, the reason that we negate that to be the case is because we've been conditioned out of it. From the minute that we are born into this world, we are navigated down a specific path, and that specific path is almost, I want to say, intelligently designed to kind of disconnect ourselves from ourselves. It leads us down a path that creates an image of what our lives should look like and not what they are meant to be like. It takes us down this path of almost creating a plan for us when that path is already within us internally. We already have like a blueprint that we came here with. I know that many people talk about soul blueprints and plans that we come here with. I mean, can you imagine? I know our lives feel and look chaotic on a daily basis, but can you imagine what the world would look like and our individuals' lives would look like if we didn't have a plan? It would be even more chaotic than we're seeing on the outside at the moment. And so we're kind of taken down this path of disconnect from ourselves, with an idea of what it looks like to achieve success in life. And 9 times out of 10, the success that people achieve in life is not necessarily the success, I can't even say it, the success that we are wanting for our own individual lives. And it is because we are being navigated by, guided by this outside source, whatever the case may be, whether that be, especially this day and age with social media, with our family's expectations of us, our what we perceive to be our friends' expectations of us, and it takes us away from that authenticity of who we are. I talk about authenticity a lot, and I talk about discernment a lot, and I recognise that it's coming up a lot in sort of videos that I'm making at this time, content that I'm making at this time, and therefore I feel that it is a real paramount message of importance that's coming through at this time, is really to be in that position where we are coming back into a deeper state of awareness of who we are at the core without the noise all around us. It's really learning to sort of navigate and go back within and allowing our internal compass to guide us. Now, at first it can be incredibly challenging to do that because, again, as I mentioned, we've been conditioned from day dot to follow a certain path, to be conditioned to go down the sort of traditional route of going to nursery, going to school, getting really good grades, leaving school, maybe going into higher education, leaving higher education, getting a really good job that pays a certain amount of money, settling down by a certain age, having a certain amount of children. And trust me when I say that, you know, even though I've kind of have navigated myself down to some degree a suggested path for me, my life certainly isn't conventional. What am I now? I have to question this quite a few. I'm 41 now. I don't have a partner. I haven't had a partner for a very, very, very long time. I don't have children. It's not something that I have contemplated on whether I want or don't want. I've always just been very much of that mindset of, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. You know, that's obviously my path for me, and that's okay either way. But I certainly tried to take myself, interestingly, down a conventional path for so long. And it never worked. I was incredibly miserable trying to take myself down a conventional path, trying to fit myself into a specific expectation of what normal looked like. And for want of a better term, it all went a bit sideways. And what it allowed me to lean into and learn from that process was that when we try and force an outcome rather than trusting our path to unfold and to just allow us to lean into that, it can really cause us to push ourselves upstream. And the more we try and push ourselves upstream, the more challenging our life can get. The hint is in the title that we've been given. I don't know who gave it to us, but it's been given to us for a very long time, that we refer to ourselves as human beings, not human doings. And the traditional way of life for a very long time has to be in that, has been where we've been in that doing energy. You know, if I do this, then I achieve this outcome, and then I'll be happy. And if I do this, I'll achieve this outcome, and then I'll get loads of money. And if I do this and I achieve this, then that person will be, you know, they will approve of me. You know, I'll receive some sort of validation. We were never put on this earth, and we are not spiritual beings from the perspective of doing. Our purpose is to be. And in the process of being, everything falls into alignment. I'm not saying that we have to be passive in the process and just sit there and just, you know, lie on our bed all day and expect everything to just show up in our lives. I mean, that would be wonderful if that were the case. But certainly, when we take the pressure off our own shoulders to try and force an outcome, we have access to a higher state of awareness. So I'll use the analogy of what it looks like and feels like to do a mediumship reading. So essentially, the world that we live in is largely based on like logic, and is very driven by the ego mind. The ego mind is in that mindset of doing to achieve an outcome. But when we connect to our spiritual part of ourselves, we work from the right brain. And the right brain is the left brain is the more masculine aspect, the doing, and the right brain is the feminine aspect. It's the being in the energy of receptivity, allowing. And both have their place. So we can't discount one or another. They've both got their place, but it's finding balance and harmony between the two. And that is where we're, I guess, being called to sort of come into alignment with at this time. It's finding balance between the masculine and the feminine, bringing them into coherence with one another. And so when we're working in a mediumship reading, because we've been so conditioned for such a long time to be in this process of doing, a lot of people, when they go into development of mediumship, find themselves stumbling at first, and that's completely normal. And the reason being is because we go into it with an expectation that we have to force it to happen. We have to do something to make the connection work. And actually, when we're working with the energy of mediumship and connecting to, spirit guides, past loved ones, we're putting ourselves into a state of being, receptivity, opening our energy field, raising our vibration, and just trusting that a connection will take place. And it is so backwards to us to get our heads around that. It's not meant to make sense to the logical mind because it's not connected to the logical mind. It's connected to that spiritual aspect of ourselves that is connected in a completely different way. And so when we're working with mediumship, a lot of it can just feel like we're sat there doing nothing. And do you know what? That is actually the point. We are just meant to be opening up our energy and trusting that something's going on behind the scenes. And this is what a lot of us are needing to realize in our life at the moment, is that it's okay to take our hands off the wheels every once in a while. If we've been trying to force an outcome for a very long period of time and nothing is happening, usually something is happening in that process. Something is telling us to stop. And we've all had it in our lives where we have things show up on our path where we think, why isn't this working? Why isn't this going in the direction that I want? Why isn't this, why isn't this like easy? Nothing's happening. And actually, sometimes we're getting the biggest hint of all that it is happening at the moment, and it literally is saying it's not working because it's getting you to do something differently. And sometimes when we just surrender and just go, okay, I don't know what to do, that is when the light bulb moment happens. That is when divine intervention is received. That is when the answers come to us, is in the surrender process. Because in the moment of surrendering, letting go and allowing, we are trusting, and we're in that state of flow, a state of trust, where we're opening ourselves up to something greater than us and saying, okay, something's going to work out, something's going to happen. My grandma was one of the greatest teachers of that in my life. She always had, she's transitioned now. In fact, at the end of this month, so 31st of December 2025, it will be her 100th birthday. So no doubt we'll find some sort of way to celebrate that for her. But she had this magical way of just, I remember if I was sort of worrying about something or, stressing about an outcome of something of some sort, and I'm getting goosebumps when I talk about this, so I know that she's around. And I'd sort of relay those sort of concerns to her. And she'd just say, almost like with a knowing look, bless her, she'd say, something will work out, you'll see. And it always did. And that's the way she lived her life. And something always worked out for her. Something always worked out. Something always showed up for her. And so I guess the message that I'm trying to sort of bring forward through this, or I am bringing forward through this, is that sometimes the most beneficial thing that we can do in our lives, if we feel that our life's not moving in the right direction, or things aren't working, or am I going in the right direction? Am I on the right path? Sometimes the most beneficial thing we can do in life is just be. To just slow down, to just stop and just be. Because in that moment of being, we automatically shift our vibration. I remember when I was sort of jumping between corporate jobs, before I took the leap of faith to do what I do now, and the job before the last job that I took the leap of faith from, I was so completely broken at the time. This was only a couple of years ago. I was so completely broken at the time. My body was just absolutely shattered. I had to leave the job that I was in at the time because I just was too unwell to work. I just physically could not get myself out of bed at the time to do anything really. I had no energy for a number of different reasons. I'd been diagnosed with epilepsy, and that was taking a sort of hit on my body. I'd had years and years of burnout that had built up. I was in the midst of relapse into anorexia, so my body was really malnourished, really, really struggling. But as challenging as it was at the time, and I'm not recommending it to anybody at all to get themselves into this state, but it had its benefits at the time, because where I was so depleted at the time, it caused me to be in this position of being. It forced me into a position of being, and I know that was my guides, and mainly because I hadn't listened to them for a long time. They had been sort of giving me hints, oh, it's not working. Why is it not working? Why am I not receiving progression in my work? Why are things not working out? Like I said before, the clue is in the fact that it's not working because it's not meant to, and sometimes that is the message. It's not working because we're not going to be going down that path. But it took me to being completely depleted to get that message. But it allowed me in that moment. I had a 6-7 month break where I was on sick leave, and because I was so depleted, I physically had to stop. And it was just the most incredible lesson that I could have ever learned, because in that experience of just stopping and just being, my world started to open up for me. I started to sort of move through really, really deep moments of healing, and I really, really lent into my spiritual abilities, my spiritual gifts. I started to reopen them again. But what I did more than anything is I just trusted. And when I just took my own hands off the steering wheel, that's when I started to receive almost, nudges, an awareness of nudges, little glimpses of things that, of actions that I could take. So this is when I say, we don't have to be passive in it, and we certainly don't want to be passive in it. But when we're trying to look outside for the answers, we're neglecting the fact that the answers are always within us. So when we sort of slow down, stop, we can actually access that guidance that we've been receiving all along, whether that's through, dreams that we're receiving. Some of us receive messages in dreams, whether it's through a conversation that we're having with a stranger that just seems to be exactly the right place at the right time, whether it's a gut instinct, a little nudge that we should be doing something, whether it's seeing, somebody who has walked a similar path to you, and you're watching like this kind of video and they're talking about something that they did, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, that would be, why don't I go down that path, and that could work for me. And we have like this access to these different levels of awareness that we didn't have access to before, because we were kind of blinkered to the path that we were on. And so ultimately, I guess the message that I wanted to share with you today is to give yourself the gift of just being, and to be a human being, however that may look for you. Even if it's just once a week where you just go, right, I'm going to take my hands off the steering wheel, I'm not going to try and force anything. But as so many of us at this time are really, really wrapped up in that sort of trying to force that, like especially right now, because there is so much chaotic energy across the planet, that there's even more energy of like, we need to sort of do something to change this. And sometimes the most potent, most powerful thing that we can do is to be in that energy of being, to find that sort of like alignment within yourself on your own path, and start living in that authenticity, just being really content in your own being, living in that authenticity, being that sort of vibrant light for others that helps to sort of like shift things on the outside, helps others sort of step up to do the same. Like a really good analogy of that is, say you're in a job that you just not is soul destroying, it's not working for you, And you know that there's other people in the company that are feeling the same thing as well. But everybody's a little bit too fearful to do something about it, to take that leap of faith. And so you sort of plod along and you're like, well, maybe things will get better, and, you know, I've got to like pay the bills and I've got to do X, Y, Z. But it's classic, and I've seen it happen time and time again, where someone will take the leap of faith. They'll make a decision. They'll go, right, that's it. I've had enough. Whatever sort of pushes them to that limit, because there's always something that pushes us to the limit. And we go, okay, I've had enough. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to take the leap of faith. And then about 10 other people very shortly after will decide to do the same thing, and they'll leave. And so it's kind of looking at it from that perspective. You know, if we are wanting to see a change in the world around us, if we're wanting to see change in our individual lives, then it's up to us to be that change that we're wanting to see. And sort of looking at it from a perspective of knowing that we're not one person in the process of doing so. We are so much more than that. Us taking action is a very, very powerful position to be in, especially if we're feeling like called to take action. That usually in itself is a little inner nudge of where we're meant to be going. If something feels like you're meant to be doing something different and you've got an inkling of what that might be, there's your answer. That's coming up because it's saying, go in that direction. You're meant to be doing this. Again, you know, when I was in the position that I was in, that was exactly what happened to me. It, you know, by any means, it wasn't. I think a lot of people might sort of look at my journey and think it was like all smooth sailing. It certainly wasn't. It's because I was stubborn as a mule, and I always have been, and I wasn't listening to the signs, or, you know, my guides giving me little nudges here and there, my higher self, my inner compass, whatever you want to call it. I certainly wasn't listening to it. But when I did start listening to it, and I started to lean into what my heart was calling me to do, what my soul was calling me to do, which was to reconnect to that spiritual part of myself and start developing and opening up and, you know, doing the work that I do now, it all just kind of started to make sense for me. And the minute that I just found myself in a position where I, for want of a better term, had to take a leap of faith, it all worked out. And so essentially, the more that we just lean into that trust, not even needing to know where we're going, we kind of had this greater state of awareness that there is always something behind the scenes that is taking care of things for us. You know, there is something that is navigating the path ahead for us. And even if that is, you know, not necessarily our spirit guides, but our higher self, something is always navigating us to where we need to be. We are never going to go so much off course in our lives that we are not going to find ourselves back on the right track. I would say definitely take a leaf out of my book if you can, to not get it to the point that you have to make a dramatic change. The nudges, the hints are always there. You know, it's just sort of paying attention to them in whatever case we can. Like I said, sometimes we get messages through dreams. Sometimes we get it through strangers that we have conversations with. We have this inner knowing that those are nudges. What is the challenging part is taking action towards those little nudges, those little glimpses, those little things that are saying, go in this direction. And again, the reason it can be so challenging is because we've been conditioned for such a long period of time to go in a certain direction. And again, that's that ego mind, that's that neural wiring that we've sort of acted on for so long, that's become that sort of comfort zone for us. So when we try and lean away from something that is not logic, but it's based on our heart and that sort of doing aspect, it's really challenging, because, or mainly because when we first lean into that new path, the fear sort of comes up in our system because we've conditioned it to. We've taught ourselves to walk a certain path, and that certain path becomes our safety net. So the minute that we lean away from that safety net, the fear receptors just kick in. Just allow them and trust that they're doing that for a reason, not because we're going down the wrong path, just acknowledge them and have an awareness that, oh, they're kicking in because I'm doing something differently. Doesn't mean it's fearful, doesn't mean it's wrong for me. Certainly, if you're getting that sort of strong pull in your heart in a direction, that is an indication that it's taking you there for a reason. It's learning to trust it, leaning into it, and just allowing it to unfold how it needs to be, having that faith that it's going to take you where it needs to be taken. I really hope that message sort of serves people in the way that they need to receive it at this time. But it's just understanding that we are so much more than we have been led to believe, and we are really having accessibility to that that awareness at this time. And so the message ultimately, I guess, of this recording today is to trust, to have faith, to practice discernment in life at the moment, and to stop looking outside ourselves for all the answers, and to really lean into what we already know within. And we do that by just being. We're just stopping, by slowing down, by taking a moment to pause and just open ourselves up to that deeper state of knowing that is already within us. And especially when we are sort of leaning into the guidance of the heart and allowing that to navigate the path ahead for us, we cannot go wrong. It certainly may not feel right at first, because we have taught ourselves to go a completely different route previously. But the more that we lean into the language of the heart and what it's telling us to do and how it's sort of guiding us, the more we will see that our life will unfold effortlessly. And it really is effortless. It's like I said, when we're in that aspect of doing, it feels like a struggle. It feels like pressure, like we're trying to force something to happen. If you're trying to force it, it's just not meant to be. And it's, that's a lesson in itself. When we work and take action from the space of the heart, it really is effortless, and life becomes joyful. It does become a lot slower, and a lot of us are not used to that, because we're so used to having so much noise and so much busyness around us 24/7. But the energy that we're moving into now is really, even though things are picking up pace and really speeding up at the moment, when we really lean into the energy of the heart, it's so easy and so free-flowing, and just everything is effortless. And again, it's really like when we connect to a mediumship reading. When we get into that flow state of just opening up and allowing the information to come through us, it is effortless. We don't have to think about how to make it happen. We don't have to sort of force a certain outcome. We just open up and we just allow, and the information and the connection just flows effortlessly. That is what it's like to live from the space of the heart, and to allow your heart to guide you. And so I hope that message supports and guides you today. I hope it gives you maybe the answers that you were seeking at this time, or the answers that maybe you weren't seeking. And if you've got any questions for me, please let me know in the comments. If you'd like me to discuss anything else, please let me know in the comments. But yeah, if there's anything that you can take away from this, I really would just recommend, as often as you can, just being. Thanks guys, take care. Bye.